you love to talk a big game about not being a pet guy, but we all know you were the one who wanted to move her cage if it was near a draft, and she'd be wrapped around your neck at night.
Well, and she didn't behave like a dog. She thought she was a person. Welcome to With You Podcast,
where we explore relationships and life transitions.
I'm David.
And I'm Tara.
And we are going to talk about a different type of relationship today.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about human relationships. This time we're going to talk about something a little different.
Something I have very little experience in.
I mean, not as little as you think.
No, I guess in our own family we're going to talk about, drumroll,
relationship with pets.
Relationship with pets.
Yeah. I mean, we just have been thinking about how animals have kind of a big role in most people's lives.
Yeah, most people.
Yeah, a lot of people's, especially Americans,
Yeah.
I think. I mean, it's different in different cultures how pets are valued or not valued, or if they live in the house or not.
Yeah, like in Europe and Africa and other places, pets are outdoor things.
Right. And we pamper our pets in America.
We dress them up.
Yeah. That makes me think of a lot of things we can talk about pets. But we just wanted to kind of explore the idea that animals are helpful to our mental health, to our maybe practicing relationships and caretaking.
Yeah, and how they affect us. So maybe we start with what was our experience growing up, and I'll go first.
Okay,
because it'll be shorter.
It will be a lot shorter, and it was honestly one of the things I was worried about marrying you.
I know. I think that was probably other than geography in our pre-marriage, the pet issue was something we spent more time on.
Probably, yeah. Our biggest disagreement, maybe.
Yeah. And so my family growing up, we had pets, but we had pets that were fish.
Those aren't pets.
Well, that was the closest thing to pets. So my mom had asthma and respiratory issues and allergies. And I don't know if it was really the reason we didn't have pets, but that was the verbal reason why we didn't have any hairy objects other than Nathan and I in the house. Yeah. And so we didn't have dogs, we didn't have cats, we didn't have gerbils, anything with hair was not part. I think we had a crab at one point. Don't quite know.
A crab?
Yeah. What do you know those land crabs?
Yeah, we did when we had our kids, but we'll get into that.
But I think pets were important to Nathan and I. And it was fish. It was only fish. We had fish, and it was freshwater fish.
Yeah,
so
nothing that you could cuddle.
No, and it was fascinating watching. We had the algae sucker, and that was the cleaner.
What is the algae sucker?
I don't know what type of fish it is, but we got it because Nathan and I really weren't great at cleaning the fish tank, and so it would just go along the inside of the glass eat all the algae.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to really clean
a
up
useful
after
fish.
It was a useful fish, and for us, we learned about everything was really about death in our family because my dad was a funeral director, and so we would have fun having fish funerals.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that was a strange thing until I met you.
Well, I mean, I think everybody experiences that when they have childhood small pets.
Yeah, but we would stand around the toilet and I'd make Nathan sing Amazing Grace. And then we'd have a little conversation about the fish, and then we'd flush it down. And when we were little, we were having so much fun. Occasionally we didn't wait for the fish to die.
Oh, that's not something you needed to add.
Okay. But it did provide us life lessons about responsibility or lack thereof in caring for a living being, and then the need for ritual around death. So
good lessons.
That's the end of my pet experience.
Essentially a petless home.
Really, it was a petless home.
Yeah, and mine was a menagerie.
Ooh, that sounds French.
Yeah, a lot of animals. My parents really liked having pets. At least my dad did. I'm pretty sure my mom, it was a lot of extra work for her.
Yeah. Well, and it was international pet ownership.
Well, yeah, anywhere we lived, we had pets, I think.
Did they travel with you?
Once.
Ooh, I want to hear that story later on.
No, I mean, yeah. So my first memory well, my first thing I've been told about my first pet was that we had a canary called
Okay.
Goldie, and it was
Oh.
my first word was go go for Goldie, the bird.
Oh,
Did you know
I did not
See,
know
that's
that.
new.
Yeah.
So I liked
Huh.
watching the bird. That was a first pet, I guess, but I
Yeah.
don't remember it.
Yeah.
What I do remember is when I was in grade school and we lived in the US, I really wanted a hamster. I
Okay.
don't know why.
Oh,
I think, yeah, I can't remember what age. No, now this is bringing up another memory actually that's kind of funny.
okay. Well, tell that
Yeah,
one.
so I must have been quite young because some young grade, it was probably first grade where we had a pet in a classroom pet, sometimes
Oh, yeah. You
a
take it home.
teacher.
We had that too. We have to
Yeah,
take it home and take care of it. And I was frightened
I
that
bet you
I
were.
would kill it.
Well, so
Not intentionally.
yeah, let's just let's just keep the pets alive in this podcast.
Okay. So you're in grade
Unless we
school.
have to make a disclaimer that this could be upsetting.
Yeah.
So when I was really young, I really wanted a hamster as a cuddly little pet, and so my parents helped me making it a responsibility lesson, I guess. So
Yeah.
I had to save my money and find out how much it was going to cost and the accessories,
Yeah.
the cage and the food. And
Did it
so
have one of those little tunnel systems that the
no,
hamsters run through?
it was
No.
pretty simple.
Okay.
But I did save up my money, which it was $1 for a
Ooh.
hamster at
How long
Kmart.
how long did it take you to save up $1?
I don't remember. And sadly, I don't remember the hamster's name, but I did go to Kmart and
Okay.
purchase this hamster and the cage
Yeah.
and went home, and it was my little friend. But I do, similarly to your pet experience with pet funerals, I do remember the day we came home from being out somewhere and my little
Oh,
hamster was no
was no
longer
more.
living and had to have a little backyard funeral, and it was very memorable. But my other memory that just popped up about this was that my classroom had a pet rat, believe it or not, that was living in
Mm.
the classroom in a cage. But over the weekend, you had to sign up to bring it home and care for it until you brought it back on Monday. And and I do remember the rat's name. It was John the rat. I don't know why, but we put its cage next to my hamster,
Okay.
and rats have long tails. In the morning, my hamster had bitten John's tail
Oh, no.
badly.
Oh, no. Poor
I
John.
had to take the rat back to school with a big bandage around its tail.
Did your parents doctor it up? And
I don't think my mom was thrilled about that either. She didn't want to touch either of them, but
Oh,
that was,
poor John.
yeah, that was an early pet experience. But we always had dogs. I
Okay.
think almost everywhere we lived that I can remember. And that was the pet that traveled. So
Okay.
when we were living in Kenya, my mom decided she wanted Yorkshire Terriers. I think there was somebody else that was breeding Yorkshire Terriers.
Mhm.
And so they don't seem like dogs that would do well in Africa.
No, they're
'Cause
tiny
they're
little
tiny,
things.
they close to
Yeah.
the ground. We had wild animals,
Yeah.
but they were really tough. They would go off by themselves, and who
That's
knows?
remarkable.
We had snake, poisonous snakes, cobras, and
Yeah.
mambas in our yard.
And cats like big
I think
cats.
terriers are good at catching critters, though.
Yeah.
But anyway, so when we came back to the U.S., they had to travel on the plane in the cargo section.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so my parents had a special cage made where they could be in the same cage, but they were separated by a little
Okay.
divider,
So they could see
so they could
each
have
other.
each other.
Yeah.
Because they were very, very connected to each other, as you
Yeah.
remember,
Is
because
this Chief and Trixie?
this is Chief and Trixie.
Oh, man. Chief and Trixie. I have stories about Chief and Trixie, but no wonder
You
they
remember
started.
them in their old age.
Yes.
Yes. We also had cats, and I know you have strong feelings about cats.
I do. Like one of my theology colleagues, I think cats are kind of the representation of evil in the world.
Yeah, and that's your story, and you're sticking
I'm
to it.
sticking to it. And I love this colleague because every PowerPoint, he teaches theology. And every time he talks about sin, he has a little picture of a cat somewhere on his slide. And it just warms the cockles of my heart.
It's one of the things that connects you guys.
That's right.
Yeah.
So-
But the cat is another memory. When we first moved to Africa, I very
Yeah.
much wanted a pet, and we were having dinner at somebody's house because we were very newly moved in, and this cat who I think was well known in the town we lived in as a stray cat that just wandered from house to house, came to the back door meowing. And I asked the owners if it was their cat. They said, no, she just lives around town. And I
Okay.
asked my dad if I could keep this cat. And
Uh-oh.
he said, thinking this was a wise thing to
Yes.
say,
Yeah.
you can have her if she follows us home.
And there's no way that it's a
It's not just gonna,
wild cat.
yeah, it
Yeah.
goes where it wants. Of course, I stuffed some chicken into my pocket or
What?
some sort of food.
Turnarell.
She followed us home. She became my cat.
I believe that's not the spirit of the rule your dad was.
He didn't say by what means I could not have her follow me.
Oh, man.
And she was gray with yellow eyes, and she's the one that she had kittens all the time. So I honestly think this is partly
Why
the beginning
you're-
of why I was fascinated about birth, because
Oh.
I would put my hand on her belly and I could feel all these wiggling kittens around inside her. And I would come home from school eager to find out if she'd had her kittens. And,
Yeah, and you learned
Yeah.
about the birth process. She
Yeah.
had them in your bed or under your bed?
She did once. Actually, my cousin was sleeping over. And anyway, we probably don't want to go too deeply into that story.
Again, I think fish are probably a good option.
I'm not traumatized.
I am. You tell all these stories, I'm like, oh my goodness, what kind of mess? I can see why you said your mom probably had a lot to think and feel about
Yes.
having all these
There was
pets.
another cat in Africa called Sooty. It was a Siamese cat. And it it didn't go to the bathroom in the litter box, and my mom was very upset with that cat. So yes, they do cause some cleanup problems in life.
So did that cat use the toilet facilities? Is that?
No.
Oh.
No, it was always to be found under somebody's bed, or it was not good.
So you had wild animals that you had living in the house, basically.
No, they were domesticated. Cats, dogs, hamsters.
Yeah, and what about Rafiki?
Yeah, that was before Africa. We had a little dog named Rafiki, which in Swahili means friend.
Yes, I think of the Lion King.
Yeah, because they used that name.
Yeah,
in that.
for the
Yes.
wise
Yes.
shaman.
Well, this was our little friend dog, and she also had puppies
Oh, wow!
in the house.
So did you learn both about reproduction and birth from having all these
I
puppies?
suppose you learned about death,
I did learn
and
about
I
death.
learned about
life.
Wow,
Yeah,
isn't that interesting?
it is fascinating, and we both kind of have landed in those areas.
Yeah,
So
I think we're learning things about ourselves today.
I'm just remembering the stories that I've pushed way out of my head
Yeah.
that you've had.
But I would say in the time that we've been married, you've become more, friendly, tolerant
I think
towards.
I like how you say friendly and I say tolerant.
Not as a person, towards the idea of having animals.
Yes, that humans living with animals can be acceptable.
Yes, more understanding that there might be benefits and not just risks and detriments, right?
Yeah, and we'll get to that because like I like to do, I did some research to see, what is this nonsense? And unfortunately, the research is against me and for you. Strongly. Well, there's a couple more. We still haven't covered the pantheon of
well, we don't
pets.
have to cover all of them because that would take a long time.
Is there any more that are really good stories? Like wasn't there one cat that would go to the bathroom in a tin in a
That was Sooty.
Oh, Sooty.
That was Sooty.
Okay.
Yes.
Sooty went bathroom in a pot.
In the garbage can in our so we don't need to hear any more about that cat. We also had a bigger dog in Kenya named Tisa, which in Swahili means 9, because at that point she was our 9th dog. I think we were counting the puppies.
Oh man.
But she was a great dog, and she was at that time we kind of needed her also as a guard dog. She would just look scary. She was very friendly, but she was, people wouldn't be as likely to break into the house or anything.
Yeah. Well, and my entering into your family when I married you, I did get to know Chief and Trixie.
Mm-hmm.
And Chief was the male dog.
Yes.
And he was a runt. I mean, he was a little, I don't know how you can describe him on a podcast, but this is the face that he reminds me of.
well, you called him Snaggletooth. So that's the
Yes.
face David is making right now. Teeth hanging out.
His teeth hanging out and kind of squinted, and he had a very serious startle response. And I had a heart
He
for
was a
Chief
timid little
because
guy.
something bad happened to him.
Well, he was
And
in a cargo area of a plane all the way back from Africa.
yeah, I think that. But then Trixie was um, powerful woman.
She was, yeah. They were they were a funny couple. Yes, and I'm glad you got to meet them because you understand a little bit about our family history.
Yeah.
Yeah, and after they passed away, my parents didn't get any more dogs, but there were cats in their life after that.
So
Oh
maybe
no, that's not true.
no, that's not true because
Yes,
your mom had Cinnamon and
no, I was thinking about my dad's dog, big service dog, which
oh
I think we'll talk about later
yeah,
because it's about the benefits.
but she also had those horrible cats.
Oh, they were nice fluffy cats.
Okay, so why are pets important? This is my question. So you all can help us out, but the research I did, I went to the place that I thought would argue on my side, which was the Center for Disease Control.
You went straight to the CDC.
Yeah, I went to the CDC because I'm like, I'm sure they'll talk about all the worms and bugs and diseases you can get from pets. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, the research shows that pets are really, really helpful.
Yeah.
And the first,
Surprise.
yeah, I was like,
Well,
oh,
when we talked about the microbiome, which we can link to that, Tony Harmon
oh,
talked
that's
about
right.
dogs being helpful to our microbiome as well,
That's
which,
right. They lick our face and bring all sorts of stuff
yeah, it's
into
actually
our
good for us.
environment. But the first thing that I think everybody would agree upon is companionship. So the Center for Disease Control says really what we see in the research is that there's a reduction of loneliness and a reduction and a increase in the sense of unconditional positive regard
Hmm.
or love, like unconditional love.
Hmm.
And I can see that. My heart warmed to Chief. I appreciated him and his goofiness, and we would get along really well. But that idea of companionship
Yeah.
I think of our neighbor Mary. She had a
Yes.
dog that was really really her companion, and
Yeah, she was single and she really, really loved her dog. And yeah, they do. There's something about having another living being around you,
yeah,
even when it's not a person, but something that responds to you, that can be by you, even just the warmth, the actual physical warmth
yeah.
of another being. It's comforting.
Yeah, so that was the first thing. There's other. So I showed you the
Hmm.
research. What else
Yeah,
stood
well,
out to
I'm sure
you?
you'd be very interested in the mental health benefits because it is really proven over and over that having a pet is beneficial for your mental health.
Yeah, really powerfully so. And it doesn't matter what type. I mean, I think it has to be something other than fish. Uh, but
Maybe, but there is some, I mean, fish don't provide the same cuddling benefits and, don't respond to you that much, but there's something soothing, they have them often in doctor's offices and waiting rooms where there's something soothing about watching them swim around and it's
yeah, that's
it's
true.
it's maybe it's just the same as the benefits of nature, something natural, something organic. Um,
Yeah, I think it's passive, that there's that passive relaxation that comes. I think the mental health benefits that we see here, it's more of the interaction, the
mhm.
relationship
Yeah,
is where the strength comes. I mean, it's that reduction of not being alone,
mhm.
being able to talk to a pet and have them listen and not talk back.
Right.
Sounds great.
Yes.
So, uh,
Sometimes we don't need a fix, we just need a listening ear.
yeah, and it takes a lot to train young therapists to do that, and pets can do it pretty easily.
That reminds me of a song we learned to sing when I lived in Australia. It was, I think, 2nd or 3rd grade. There was a lot of emphasis on songs. We did music every day, and one song that I still remember, I'm not gonna sing it because it
Oh,
would
come
really
on. I think that would be
see if I
wonderful.
can find a recorded version. But
Okay.
I remember the words because we'd sing it. It said, "I talk to my dog and she listens. I say nothing's wrong. I see the answer in her eyes. And in a little while, I begin to smile. I talk to my dog and she listens. Isn't that
Aw,
cute?
that is super cute. Now I wanna hear you sing
I'm
it.
going to find a properly recorded version.
Well, and another, I mean, just like laughter, there's humor. I remember your dad watching the cats and
Hmm.
watching his dog, and just deep chuckle, the
Yes.
joy that it would bring in difficult times in dealing with chronic illness, feeling down. The pets would make him laugh.
Yes. He'd get some deep laughs after just
Oh,
watching their antics.
yeah, and just kind of that physiological response really
Hmm.
helped mental health. And I think for us, seeing like our kids, because I'll take the responsibility because I didn't grow up with pets, wasn't a real big pet family encourager. And our
Hmm.
kids were anxious about pets, anxious about other animals. And what the research says is it reduce mental health, reduces anxiety having a pet. And we really saw that with some of our kids once we
Hmm.
had a pet.
That was kind of the tipping point for me because I was being respectful of you not wanting a pet. But when I saw our children when they were small be really afraid around anybody else's dog,
Yeah.
I didn't want them to grow up that way their whole life. And exposure is helpful for them to have a relationship with an actual
Yeah.
pet or dog so that they wouldn't be so afraid.
And it taught them facing their fears, but also just the relaxation, what happens in their body. So, like laughter, but the breathing and the relaxation really decreases anxiety, which surprised me. I mean, as we talk about it, it makes sense.
Hmm.
But not growing up with pets is like, what do you mean there's mental health benefits to
Hmm.
an animal? We need to have this interaction, and there is a robust interaction that happens.
Yeah. Well, and if you talk about relaxation, dogs model that for us really well because they sleep a good portion of the day.
Yeah.
And so it helps you slow down to just sit with them sometimes.
And depending on the breed, they tend to have a playful attitude, which is a really, I mean, I think about that if I tried to have a playful attitude, which helps me navigate things.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, other mental health benefits
Yeah.
that I'll
Well,
underscore.
um, let's see. I mean, just on a physiologic basis, they are shown to reduce the actual stress levels in humans, just being around them, reduce the cortisol levels.
Oh yeah,
So that has a lot of benefits because when we run around with a high level of cortisol in our bodies,
which
there's
is a
other,
stress hormone.
yeah,
Yeah,
when we're stressed like that, and that becomes our baseline, there's a lot of other bad effects on our health. So if something, just having a companion around can reduce that level, there's
yeah.
a lot of benefits that maybe we don't even know long term.
Yeah, and I know kind of those same physical and emotional regulation, it's really been shown to be helpful with PTSD. So PTSD, just a quick what it does is if you have a stressful or traumatic experience, you can see just a portion of that, maybe not really a traumatic experience, but your brain tells you heightened threat and you have a physiological response. The pet can help you regulate that and
Hmm.
kind of slow down, which actually changes how your brain works around experiencing perceived threat or past trauma and having a different biological response, which is what therapy does. And so it's really,
That's pretty cool.
I
So,
know, I know.
yeah, there's,
This is a really hard episode for me because I'm like, oh man, there might be something wrong with me because I didn't have a pet.
oh no, is that where you're going with this?
Yeah, a little bit. I could probably have better mental health
No,
if I.
there's, you can always just do better.
Well, and
um,
the last mental health thing is, oh, I forget.
I know what you're doing. You're talking about cognitive
Oh
function
yeah, that's right.
in the older folks
That's
like
right.
us. Yeah. Yeah. So having, and I'm not sure what the reasoning is, except maybe it's the interaction piece that helps improve cognitive function, just to having increased interaction and maybe responsibility.
Yeah, and taking care of something else. So
Hmm.
similar to what you had to do of raise money, kind of take care of the gerbil, nope,
The
hamster.
hamster, same, similar.
Same thing. But you had all this responsibility and something to attend to and care for, and I think
Yeah.
it
Well,
has an impact.
I wouldn't say we're far into the category of elderly, but I do see how that caretaking piece is helpful because, especially when parents have spent a good number of years raising their children and
Yeah.
all of their efforts and energy are putting into caretaking for their children, when that reduces or goes away, there's
Hmm.
this gap left. And there's still a need, I think, for humans to care for something.
Yeah.
A lot of people get into plants or feeding birds or getting a cat or dog. We've done all of those things. I have, at
You
least.
have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think for our belief system, right? We're made to care for each other. We're made to care for creation, and this
Mhm.
is an extension of that.
Mhm.
Where maybe some, as we get older, there's some reduction of availability to do that. A pet provides a way of living out maybe how we're supposed to be
Yeah.
living.
Yeah. I like that. It's on a bigger level.
Yeah, that's not the research, but that's just kind of a theological thought around that. So the next one is physical health. And this is like, I don't know about physical health with a cat, but I think physical health with a dog makes
Yeah.
sense. You have to go out and walk it. I mean, our neighbor, I see him in the dead of winter
Mhm.
trudging, and not going to lie, it doesn't look fun. But I could probably use the exercise. And
Yeah.
so,
Well, I do know friends who, when they get a dog, they lose weight right away because every day they're going out walking the dog. And
yeah,
so it keeps you moving more. I do remember too, this neighbor doesn't live across from us anymore, but we had a neighbor who had what was the breed of their dog?
Shih
Was it
Tzu. I just like saying Shih
no,
Tzu.
no, no. It was a golden retriever, maybe. I'll
Oh,
have
yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
ask
yeah,
them.
yeah.
But it was so fun to watch when they'd go outside in the snow, and the dog loved to play in the snow, and he'd be shoveling snow and the dog would be leaping, trying to catch it in the air. And it was fun for us to watch and good exercise for him.
Yeah, yeah. And
Not
so
so much for us.
I think that physical health, but there, and it shows like with the cortisol level, with the stress hormone, there's heart health benefit and
Hmm.
lowering blood pressure. In
Boy, you are
addition,
making a strong argument for pets
I'm
here.
just saying the CDC, I mean, they may not really know their research. So, but this is
Yeah.
what they're saying. And even so it's a lot about your heart, both
Right. And blood
relationally and
pressure,
physically.
yeah, especially for older people who live alone, having a pet, especially one that can be near them and cuddle,
Yeah.
reduces your blood pressure.
And then the last is I don't know how they measure this, but good cholesterol, lowering the bad
I don't know.
yeah.
We'll
So
just have to believe that one.
yeah. So I think there's physical health.
Yeah. So another benefit that you found in your
Yeah.
research that you looked up,
Fair. All right.
was social benefits. And I think that one's really clear too. I mean, if you see people with dogs, they're all gathering with each other. It's a good conversation piece. You ask about people's pets. Um, there's also for the children benefit. They're learning about social skills by, learning to interact, learning how to maybe train, like
Yeah.
behavioral things.
Yep.
So there's,
Little steps to build to bigger steps in terms of tricks and like shaking hands and all of that. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, we agree with that. I don't think I have anything to add about the social benefits. I think
No, I mean,
that's
self-regulation, behavioral regulation, setting limits, all of those things are good.
mm,
That are
yeah,
social. I mean, I think about like what we wanted to do in parenting, and there's, you have the relational connection and care, but you also want them to play, but play within boundaries. And our kids kind of did that with our dog,
yeah.
um, and learned some emotional
Yeah, and then they
regulation.
started accusing me of spoiling her.
Yeah, then they critique our
They
parenting
critiqued our parenting of
through
our
the dog.
dog.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was just like, oh boy.
Yeah.
And then what we're doing is having conversations of like at school, being able to interact with other people, or when they're out with the dogs, interacting with other people.
Mhm.
That dog walkers tend to have their dogs talk to each other. I don't know. This is where I
It
get
helps it
lost.
helps the humans interact. It's an icebreaker. Dogs are
Yeah.
a really good icebreaker.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and then the one that I think we want to talk about Beethoven a bit is the therapy assisted dogs.
Yeah.
That there's a couple of things, but dogs are helpful both for chronic illness or disability as a therapy assist, or emotional therapy assist, that we're at our clinic, we're training a dog. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, to be a therapy assistant dog because
Yeah.
the research
Shout
is
out to
really,
Jesse.
really good. Yeah. Calms the nerve, physical regulation, caring for
Yeah.
others.
And in a lot of colleges, when it's finals week, they'll bring dogs onto campus to just let the students interact because it's calming,
Yeah. The
it's
petting.
regulating,
Yeah.
it's stress reducing. Yeah, and there's a whole industry of support animals that
Yeah.
help people physically and emotionally. And my dad did so after we left Africa. That was the only other dog that my parents owned. When my dad was declining with a degenerative disease,
Yeah.
his physical abilities were he was losing the ability to balance, and
Mhm.
so he would fall down sometimes.
Have a hard time getting up.
Yeah, so they they got a dog that I think they first went through a program where they had trained a dog, and the dog ended up not being a good match
Yeah.
for my dad. And then they lived in a town in Colorado where it was a small town, and everybody talked, and they had heard from somebody that a dog was abandoned, a Saint Bernard,
Yeah.
and it was just about a year old, and they were wondering if somebody could take it. My dad is always loving a project and wondered if this could be a good assist dog for him because of
Yeah.
the size and because their breed is given to being helpful.
Yeah. Caretaking and
Yeah.
smart.
So they adopted this dog, and it was already named Beethoven, which is like the movie. If you've seen is it a
Yeah.
Disney movie?
Yeah.
Um, with a Saint Bernard
Yep.
named Beethoven. So they weren't gonna. Had already had that name for a year, so they didn't change it. But he was such a great dog,
Yeah.
and physically, if my dad fell down, the dog would come and stand by him, and my dad could basically use him as a support physically to push on him and pull himself up, and he would brace himself,
Yeah. The
and
dog
the
Bates.
dog would brace himself until my dad was stable, and then they had a special lead or
Hmm.
harness that he could hold on to as he walked, and he would stay right by his side and
Yeah.
call people if he needed help. He was really, really a great
He
dog.
was a great therapy assist dog
Yeah,
and took good care of our kids. And there were some dogs in the neighborhood that were more scary.
more
And
aggressive.
yeah,
Yeah,
Ani was like 2 and she called them Bates. And this dog would come like running, and Beethoven would just basically stand over her because he
yeah,
was huge
yeah.
and would just protect
And
her.
he would let her ride him like a horse.
Yeah, he tolerated
Yeah.
all sorts of
He
nonsense by
did.
the
He was so
kids.
gentle, and he would sit right by my dad at the dinner table and just, be quiet and slobbering everywhere. But my dad would feed him a little treat every now and then, and he would, as you said too, he would just provide laughter. He would, you
Yeah.
know, yeah,
Yeah, and with the kids, they learned when he was working, they didn't interrupt him when he was really kind of taking care of Babu,
yeah,
and then when he wasn't, they could play around and have a
yeah,
good time. So,
yeah. Well, I wanted to add something along those lines because
uh-oh, we didn't
so
talk about
I
this.
know this is a
Oh,
surprise
no.
because when you said you found research talking about therapy support animals, and that's one great benefit that pets can be for us. Um, it made me think about other, emotional support animals and funny stories about people bringing their therapy support or their emotional support animals on planes and in public places.
Okay.
And then you learn really how far this thing goes,
Yeah.
right? So I looked up some stories, which I didn't tell you because I wanted to see you react.
Oh, no.
If you look up, I mean, I've heard, and I haven't verified this, but I've heard that people have brought things as crazy as like a peacock onto planes
Yes, I've heard that too.
and saying they're their
Their
emotional support
support.
animal. But I did verify the story of Daniel the duck.
Daniel the duck.
Yes. So
What?
on a flight,
Cardinal, what are you Googling?
I mean, it seems to be true.
All right,
It seems
well.
to be reputable. But Daniel, Turducken Stinkerbutt is a 37-year-old woman support animal who has been battling post-traumatic stress disorder. So
The duck
she
or
had
the
this.
woman?
Well, I assume the woman.
Okay.
The woman had PTSD, and she had a letter from a doctor saying that Daniel the duck was an integral part of her PTSD treatment.
Okay.
So she was able to legally get clearance for Daniel to come with her on flights. So imagine being on a flight and there's somebody with a duck
Yeah,
on their
no.
lap next to you.
Yeah.
And that's not the craziest. I mean,
Well, I've just gotten off a plane and I couldn't imagine
yeah, can you
sitting.
imagine on a
No,
9-hour flight?
no.
No, but I mean, there's too many funny stories to tell about these animals. But if this has spurred you on to think about what animal you'd like to have on a plane with you, because
Yeah,
I think it would be fun.
yeah.
Um,
A duck is probably
the
not the
U.S.
top one.
Department of Transportation has announced that miniature horses are able to fly as service animals
What?
in all cabins of commercial airplanes. I have never seen a horse on a plane,
No, how does that work?
and
No.
they're mini horses.
Yeah, a mini horse is still a
It's a
horse.
big animal. And I said, I don't know if you have to buy another seat for it or where it goes, but I find that really funny to imagine.
It would have to be bulkhead.
And there's yeah, I guess so. Yeah, probably. And I mean, there's a lot of studies about horses as
Well,
great
yeah.
therapy animals for humans.
There's a whole discipline called equine therapy, which
Yeah.
is a fancy word for horse.
Yeah, and they have an amazing intuition and
Yeah.
affinity for people. But I find that funny. But they did say domestic airlines were given 30 days to review the mandate and revise rules to better accommodate first service dogs, cats, and mini horses. And they're still allowed to reject animals if they're deemed too, quote, large, dirty, or dangerous.
Oh.
So,
Huh.
yeah. So give it a try.
So yeah, I'm just thinking, like, how do you have a bag that you'd have on the horse's backside to catch?
The details.
I have a lot of
don't-
questions.
You have a lot more questions,
I have
but
a lot of questions.
let's just leave that picture in our minds of ducks and horses and pigs and all sorts of peacocks on airplanes
Yeah.
with people.
Well, the horse one makes me remember one of our colleagues in Hungary at a children's hospital dealing with kids that are dealing with very, very serious health issues. They have a horse that comes in, a therapy
Yes,
horse.
they
That's
bring a horse
It's a mini horse
inside the hospital.
in the hospital,
Mhm.
and the kids get to experience feeding it and the process of petting it, and there's a
Yeah,
whole
so
treatment.
Patty, thank you for showing us around your amazing facility.
Yeah, Bethesda Hospital. And it's remarkable to see how outcomes are positive with that. And I just would have never, given the story we just talked about, my growing up, this is such a concept that's so different. And yet,
Yeah, they're doing the same work you are.
yeah, and probably cheaper. They just get paid in hay. Well, so all of this, there's one other one that the CDC listed, and it kind of shifts from where we were going, and it's
Oh.
that it could be a good source. Pets could be a good source of food
Oh, no.
in places
Because they
where.
lay eggs, right?
Well, yes, they lay eggs. It could be chickens, pigs, but or dogs. But in different places where there's food scarcity, pets. Like if you grow up on a farm, you might see the animals as pets. You're learning all these positive things, but you also might be eating wilbur.
Yes, that's true. In our suburban pet life, that's an absolutely intolerable thought, but that's true in most of the world.
Yeah,
And farming life, you get used to the fact that pets don't always stay around.
yeah, and that there's a connection to us, a deep connection, slightly differently. So I meant that as funny, but it's also, yeah, kind of serious. So companionship, mental health, physical health, social health, therapy support, and food.
And nutrition.
Yeah, so those are how pets can be helpful. So we didn't have this conversation of all these helpful things, but we did have a conversation about, would I be comfortable us having pets when the kids were young and our family.
Yeah. Well, I came into the marriage knowing you weren't comfortable
Yes.
with hairy animals.
Yes.
So we started out our life with the children having the same as you. I think it started with a goldfish.
Yeah, I think that's true.
That honestly seemed a little more sentient than most. It did seem to follow us around the room.
It was crazy because it would respond to us and follow us.
I think our son wanted at the fair, or something. We didn't go out and purchase it. It came to us.
It came to us, and it lived a long time.
It did. Yeah. Yeah. So we did try the fish route, and honestly, it wasn't very rewarding for me. for for someone in the family, it just means cleaning the tank and not
Yeah.
overfeeding and stuff. But it was a good start. The kids did enjoy naming them and
Yeah,
watching
watching it.
them, and yeah, and then learned a bit about responsibility. If we left town, someone would have to feed it for them, and
Yeah.
so
They
it was
have
a
to
good start.
take care
But
of the life.
we always wanted more.
Well, when you say we,
Me and the kids.
okay, that's fair.
Yeah, and, we did venture into hermit crabs,
Yes.
which
Oh, wow.
was really not enjoyable at all.
No, and they smell. No one tells you that the crabs smell.
Well, we tried our best to take good care of them, and I feel like we didn't do the best job because when crabs are distressed, hermit crabs live all the time in a shell, and they have this soft underbelly,
Yeah.
whatever that they don't want to leave their shell unless they're very distressed. And a couple of times we had naked crabs running around without their shells, and
Yeah.
something's wrong. It was not
Is that when we put the Coke can in there and that became
no,
like it was in the
no,
Coke can walking
something you
around?
fantasized about, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
No, but so that was a short-lived time in our lives. I don't think the kids really enjoyed them that much either. I did not enjoy the thought of being pinched. I would have thrown them across the room if they pinched me. The kids were more tolerant. Annika, I think, would pick them up when we had to clean them, and they would pinch her, and she didn't seem to
Yeah.
mind.
She just tolerated the pain because it was part of taking care of her crab, hermit
Yeah,
crab.
yeah, yeah. So
Was
that wasn't the best.
and then we had frog, right? Or
Well, so there
how did
was
that
a
happen?
phase with these little aquatic frogs that
Yes.
lived in the fish tanks. So they're not ones that needed to come outside the water. And I think we had two of them. And those met at a rather untimely end too. That's quite a family story. We had a
Yeah.
big, you mentioned the algae sucker in your fish tank.
Yep.
We had gotten a big snail that would go around the tank and it
Cleaned.
cleans.
Yeah.
It seems that overnight the frogs and the snails had an encounter
Yeah, it was kind
and
of
the
like the
snail
sharks.
won,
Yeah, the sharks and the
surprisingly.
jets. It was kind of like the
Yeah.
gang warfare.
It was a fast snail and
Yeah.
we found, yeah, an unfortunate encounter.
It consumed.
Yeah, it cleaned too well in
Yeah.
the tank. Yeah, so that wasn't fun. Um,
Well, it was like, oh, how like it's a killer snail.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was fun to kind of
yeah.
talk through,
Maybe
but
you enjoyed that.
I did enjoy that.
Yeah, and we didn't intend on getting. We really hadn't made plans to get a dog or a cat or any furry animal. No,
Well,
we really hadn't. But my brother, who used to live in town, my youngest brother Scott, hi Scott, used to take my kids out for experiences for their birthdays. And Annika really always loved animals. She never
yeah,
played with dolls. She only wanted animals.
yep,
And so he would take her to a pet store where you could, point to a puppy in a window and they would get it out for you and you could have some time playing with. They had no intention of purchasing them, but you
yeah,
could play with the puppy. And that would be his date, which was smart because it was
yeah,
also free
yep,
and she came home really happy.
yeah, and they got to play
And
with a
Scott
pet.
moved away from town
Aw,
at some point. And I continued that with Annika because she had the desire to go to the pet store and play with the puppies. And so we went into the pet store, pulled out a very cute little puppy, and fell deeply in love with this dog
yes,
to the
yeah,
point where we couldn't imagine leaving the pet store without her. But I would not make that. We don't make big decisions like that
no,
without
without
discussing
each
it.
other, yeah,
So I reluctantly left her behind and waited for you when you came home from work to get comfortable, have dinner, be rested.
being
Said, I have
emotional, yeah,
something I need to talk to you about.
and I'm
And
like, yes,
and proposed us getting a puppy. And, we also wouldn't, if we were to seek out getting a dog, we wouldn't start with a commercial pet store either.
no,
But this was a particular animal, not the idea of a dog.
yeah,
Yeah, so we had that discussion,
and
and I think you said I'm not what I would want to do. I don't want any responsibility for it, but if you feel strongly about it, I'm not going to interfere
yeah,
with that.
it was about kind of setting boundary and expectations. Like I wasn't opposed, but I was just like, this is not my thing.
Yes, and we
Um,
were very aware of, your mom. We want to respect her health issues. Like if the dog was the kind that would really make her have trouble breathing, we wouldn't want it in the house.
yeah,
This dog also was called hypoallergenic. I've since learned there's no such thing really, but
Yeah.
it doesn't shed. It doesn't tend to be trigger allergies.
Yeah.
So I thought that would also be a good fit
So it
for.
wasn't choosing a pet versus my mom.
No,
Yeah.
and she had told me if we ever got cats, she would know she wasn't welcome, which,
Yeah.
we never even thought
No.
about getting cats.
No.
But anyway, this dog seemed to fit all those things and
Yeah.
to be a good companion for our family. So
And
after discussing,
I said, if
we
if it's
agreed.
still there, have at it.
Yeah. So Annika and I went back the next day and picked up this dog who lived with us for 14 years,
Yeah, it started out
Georgia.
as the size of like half of my hand. It was such a little
She was
bundle of
a
fur.
pound, I think, when we brought her home. And it was one of our other children, I think it was Zach's brilliant idea to name her Georgia because you were a University of Georgia fan. And so to tie you emotionally to this dog.
Yeah, the children are pretty good at
Yeah.
knowing how to work me, and
Uh-huh.
that was a
Good move.
good family move. So
Yeah.
we named her Georgia,
Yes.
and yes, I did grow fond of her.
Yeah, you really did. You love to talk a big game about not being a pet guy, but we all know you were the one who wanted to move her cage if it was near a draft, and she'd be wrapped around your neck at night.
Well, and she didn't behave like a dog. She thought she was a person,
Yeah,
and
she wasn't like our outdoor dogs in Africa. She was pretty pampered.
yeah, and to the point where I think you bought Halloween costumes for
We
her.
don't need to talk about that.
I think we do. I mean, so what part of dressing a dog up is that
I
was
know,
not in the
I
CDC.
became that person. I'd like to say it was the kids' fault, but it was kind of fun.
They didn't have a budget for dog clothes. My favorite one my favorite one was Halloween, where you dressed her up in a referee costume and it said "ruffery" on the back.
Yeah,
It was
see, you
just,
like that. You remember it.
yeah.
Well, partly we said we did dress her in sweaters in the winter because she was at her most, she was all of 7 pounds.
Yeah.
She was a very small dog.
And you were worried about the environment, that she would freeze to death because we live
just to
in
go
the
out. Yeah, I mean, it was cold. And
Arctic.
she liked having her sweater on.
And so you kept her warm. Yeah,
Yes,
I
yes.
understand. But
And timing for me, honestly, it was at the time we got Georgia right at the time when our youngest child was going off to school. So it was my first time being in a quiet house, really in my entire life.
yeah,
Because at that point I didn't have work outside the home. I'd been home with our kids with a very busy, noisy household. And so having a companion was good for me too.
Yeah.
And she was the kind that would curl up in my lap and, you know.
and we knew kind of life expectancy, kind of our big picture piece is that she would stay.
Her lifespan would be about the same as
the
when
kids'
right as
lifespan.
Yeah. And it's true. I mean,
in our house, like high school before they went to college.
Yes, not our kids'
No,
lifespan,
yeah.
but the sort of the timeline of when our kids might be launching and leaving the home was about the end of her expected lifespan,
Yeah.
and it was exactly correct.
It was.
She died the same year that Annika went to college.
Which was also right when COVID started.
Right, which was really unfortunate because it was the same time everybody was at home and getting dogs, getting
their COVID
comfort
puppies.
dogs for COVID time when they were indoors more, and that's when we didn't have Georgia. So it was a hard loss.
Yeah. And we did talk about, do we get another pet? But
I don't think you ever entertained that.
no, because I have plans for our life of traveling together, and you can take care of me.
I can walk you and feed you.
Yeah, and love me and squeeze me, all of it. But I think I do think over the years, partly by being open and responsive to kind of your experiences and our experience with Georgia, that I have changed my tune, that pets, the relationship that people have with pets, are really, really important.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Not as important as people.
Well, now our 2 married kids our oldest kids have 2 cats who you played with very nicely when we visited them.
Basil and Willet.
And our second son is getting a dog. So now we have other people's pets we can play with and be free to travel.
And then come home.
Mhm.
and leave the pets there. But I think it can be really helpful to your health, mental health, physical health, social health, of having something to care for and interact
Yeah,
with.
and we would love to hear your pet stories or see pictures of your pets. We'll post a few of our pictures of Georgia on the website.
Yeah.
We'd love you to interact there. We really would love to hear from anybody who's listening. We'd also love ideas of what you'd like to hear us talk about.
Yeah, I think on Spotify you can leave us a voice message,
Yeah.
and that can be really helpful. But yes, we'd love to hear your stories, and also what kind of relationships or life transitions would you like us to talk about?
Right. And you can just go on withyouprojects.com and leave us there's a contact form there. You can leave us a message and we would love to interact with you. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, we'll talk to you next week.